Israel has placed Gaza under complete siege in retaliation for Hamas's unprecedented attack on Israeli civilians on October 7th, after the terrorist group took over 200 hostages and killed hundreds of civilians. Israel's continued to bombard the Gaza Strip and has rejected continued calls for a ceasefire to allow Palestinian civilians to receive critical aid and resources. But strangely, this fight has somehow been taken to McDonald's and Starbucks all over the world.
Empty. So you like it. Free Palestine!
As the conflict has escalated and Palestine has suffered the vast majority of civilian deaths, companies like McDonald's have come under fire for business relations with or perceived support for Israel. For many consumers who support Palestine, the answer to this issue is easy: stop buying their products. But many are unfamiliar with the controversial tactic that's been making use of such boycotts for decades. It's called BDS. So what is BDS? And how is this relatively obscure pro-Palestinian movement getting people thousands of miles away from the conflict to stop ordering burgers from the biggest fast food chain in the world? BDS is a non-violent protest tactic that calls for boycott, divestment, and sanctioning of Israel, and takes influence from successful protest movements of the past. BDS is a method of protest used by hundreds of groups and thousands of individuals. It's not one specific organization, but rather a network of activists who use BDS as a tactic to achieve their own aims. Although BDS promotes nonviolent resistance, some groups under the BDS umbrella don't adhere to this ideal. Whereas they may use different means and have disparate end goals, BDS participants are unified in the hopes of 1. Ending Israeli occupation in the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and Golan Heights. 2. Restoring fundamental and equal rights to Palestinians under the Israeli government. And 3. Promoting Palestinian refugees' rights to return to their homes, as guaranteed by UN Resolution 194. These boycotts urge consumers to avoid buying products from businesses that are viewed as complicit in the occupation. But it's not just economic. These boycotts extend to cultural and academic institutions as well. The movement encourages musicians to avoid playing in Israel and researchers to avoid collaboration with Israeli intellectuals. Divestment calls for businesses and organizations, including banks, churches, and universities, to withdraw investments from Israel and Israeli companies. And finally, sanctions promote efforts to end foreign governments' military support of Israel and trade with Israel, and even to suspend the nation's UN membership. And BDS isn't the first group to advocate for this form of nonviolent protest. These tactics have historically been used to threaten colonial powers and apartheid regimes. One example is South Africa, which anti-apartheid activist Desmond Tutu compared to Israel's occupation of Palestine back in 2014. In South Africa, an academic boycott by the African National Congress set the ball rolling for the UN to ultimately call upon all states not to recognize this illegal racist minority regime in southern Rhodesia, and to refrain from rendering any assistance to this illegal regime. Boycotts were also used as protest tactics by American civil rights activists, like those who boycotted the Montgomery bus system. More recently, major companies like McDonald's withdrew from Russia in 2022 after its invasion of Ukraine as a protest against the country's actions. And although BDS is calling people across the world to participate in these acts of protest, it's not really a household name. Just a year ago, the Pew Research Center reported that 84% of Americans didn't know what BDS was. And in 2022, only 5% of Americans claimed to support BDS. Despite its nonviolent means and relative anonymity, BDS is a hotly contested method of protest that's been condemned by many pro-Israel activists as anti-Semitic. The Anti-Defamation League, a pro-Israel group dedicated to fighting anti-Semitism, argues that the tactic violates anti-discrimination laws against the Jewish people. They further oppose BDS's use of words like apartheid, white supremacist, and genocide to describe Israel's conduct in regards to the Palestinian territories. In support of this argument, a definition of anti-Semitism was approved in 2016 that designates holding Israel accountable for actions not expected or demanded by any other democratic nation as anti-Semitism.
With respect to a decision by the State Department that we will regard the global anti-Israel BDS campaign as anti-Semitic. I know this sounds simple to you, Mr. Prime Minister. It seems like a statement of fact, but I want you to know that we will immediately take steps to identify organizations that engage in hateful BDS conduct and withdraw U.S. government support for such groups.
The Biden administration upholds this definition of anti-Semitism and in a 2022 press release staunchly rejected BDS. However, other legal scholars have made the case that BDS is not inherently discriminatory or anti-Semitic for singling out Israel in its campaigns. This idea is supported by the distinction of boycotting goods that support the occupation rather than all Israeli products at face value. Despite the spirited debate over BDS, its actual impact on Israel's economy is thought to be relatively minimal. A 2016 Bloomberg investigation found that investment into Israel had skyrocketed since 2005 when BDS began. Bloomberg suggests that business interests have generally outweighed any political convictions. That's not to say that BDS is without its victories. BDS has gotten companies like Ben & Jerry's to stop selling their products in occupied Palestinian territories. SodaStream closed its West Bank factory. Some government pension funds across Europe and New Zealand have divested from Israel. So how does all of this come back to your local Starbucks and McDonald's being a bit emptier than usual? Supporters of the movement have specifically called out Starbucks and McDonald's for complicity with Israel's current war on Gaza after an Israeli McDonald's franchise owner distributed 100,000 free meals to Israeli soldiers and offered 50% off for all military personnel throughout the duration of the conflict. Starbucks has been spotlighted for suing a union offshoot that posted in support of Palestine on X. Anecdotal evidence on social media shows Starbucks regulars getting their coffee from different stores or making coffee at home. Some people have been placing fake orders for drinks and refusing to pay, or just ordering water. Franchises across the Middle East have been documented as being totally empty, and protesters have been targeting the stores during marches. Posts have been circulating on social media showing these corporations' stocks declining. Starbucks stock has begun to drop since October 24th, but it's not clear how much of that is influenced by boycotts and what can be attributed to other market forces. McDonald's stock is still generally on the rise, and declines seem to be minimal fluctuations that don't affect the overall price. Improving stock values might be partially due to strategic price hikes made by the corporation and promotions such as Free Fries Friday, which was announced on October 23rd. Additionally, whereas individuals' boycotts may have marginal impact on large corporations, a host of American laws ban or restrict state contractors from refusing to work with Israel in 36 states. Though these have been in and out of court, they currently preclude many businesses from joining BDS-related causes, even if they would like to. At the beginning of 2023, Bloomberg reported a 60% drop in foreign investment in Israel, partially due to lower valuations of tech companies, as well as political turmoil in the country. Though BDS efforts as they currently stand don't seem to be having an outsized impact on the economy, Israeli violence in Palestinian territories may continue the trend of diminished foreign investment.